In this video, I'm going to explain why Monero goes to $2,000 per coin. So it's currently at 212 and a market cap of 4 billion, which I believe will go to about 40 billion at the end of the cycle. And in this video, I'll explain why a target like this I believe will happen very soon. So first of all, for those who don't know, we're going to explain what is Monero. So Monero was launched in 2014 in April, and it's the first decentralized cryptocurrency that gives you true financial privacy by making every transaction and address completely untraceable and anonymous by default. So unlike Bitcoin, which tracks transactions, Monero is completely private and no one knows how much you have in your wallet or who you're transacting with. So let's go into the points to why a $2,000 Monero is actually on the table this cycle. So first, a very important point is that Monero is what Bitcoin was meant to be. So a lot of people, I think everyone knows what Bitcoin is, and a lot of people are very bullish on this asset. But Monero is actually a better version of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin's all about self-custody, not relying on banks, being outside the system is the traditional narrative you hear when people speak about Bitcoin. But it faces a clear issue, which is the lack of privacy. And people want to have privacy, they want to have ownership and freedom over their money. And a lot of people think that's what Bitcoin represents, but it's actually not what Bitcoin represents, and that's actually Monero. So Monero adds that additional layer of privacy to the ownership, and I would argue that freedom actually requires privacy attached to it. So I think Bitcoin actually misses this trifecta of having these three elements, but Monero really has this. And just recently, we can see that this actually might be reflected in the price. We can see that during this dip, where there's been a lot of fear and uncertainty, people have actually held onto their Monero, right? To the lows, it only went down about 24%, while something like Bitcoin actually fell more, right? Bitcoin fell 32%, right? And especially since Monero is a smaller asset, right? Only 4 billion compared to the 2 trillion of Bitcoin, and you would expect Monero to fall more, but actually it fell much less than Bitcoin. So people are holding on to their Monero, and they believe that this is actually a better version of Bitcoin. So now a very important point onto why you want to buy it specifically, right? Not really what it has or the narrative around it, is that everything has been thrown at Monero and it has survived. So it's been delisted from major exchanges such as Binance and Kraken, and it's actually never been touched by Coinbase. It's been banned in many countries like Japan, Australia, UK. They literally put a bounty to break Monero's privacy and failed. So it's been battle tested. People have tried to stop Monero from, being adopted and from people buying Monero. But if we zoom out, we can see that this has not been working, and that, people continue to buy Monero even with so much uncertainty and so much fear and so much aggression towards the coin from large entities such as governments. So it still faces a lot of censorship, spam attacks, and surveillance. And why this is important is that what other coin has taken as many punches and has never dropped, right? The Monero chart it's going up. Especially recently, we talked about how the market has been down by a lot. You've seen coins like Solana down 60, 70%, and Monero has barely fallen. So this just shows how much has been thrown at Monero and how resilient the coin and the community behind it is, and the investors in this asset. At this point, they're not going to sell because they've been through so much. They've been delisted and banned, and that really, if this doesn't drop the price, then what's going to drop the price? So there's probably not that much downside for a coin like this that's already faced all these tribulations. For the third point, we're going to talk about rising demand in a surveillance economy and how this narrative of privacy around transactions and the assets you own will actually become a narrative that becomes more prominent and is actually starting to become a narrative that many people, you know, are waking up to. So this idea of CBDCs, blacklists, and frozen bank accounts, right? Privacy becomes a necessity for people to transact. A story off the top of my head is this time where some people in Canada were protesting and they actually all had their bank accounts frozen. I think this was a wake up call to a lot of people that the assets you own in the bank are actually not yours and you don't have privacy, self custody over them. And Monero becomes that solution for the people who are tired of these centralized systems tightening their grip. And people are waking up to the idea that they need self custody and they need to transact through a method that's private. And Monero is the only crypto truly built to protect your financial freedom. Obviously, something like Bitcoin is much better than having your money in the bank when it comes to this regard. But the next level to that, the next step to that is Monero. So the more people are watching, the more they look for a way out of this traditional system where you don't truly own your assets, and Monero is that exit door. And once people start realizing this, the amount of demand this amount of demand will flow into so much liquidity coming into Monero, making the price go up a lot. The next important point is this idea of it's truly decentralized and community driven. So the reason why Bitcoin originally took off was because it was accessible to the average person and it gave the average person a chance at succeeding, right? Anyone could have bought Bitcoin at $1, right? It wasn't an opportunity only for VCs or only for big banks and hedge funds. Anyone could take part. And just like that idea, Monero also has no foundation, no VC funding, and no central dev team. And this is extremely important because it allows the community to own the majority of the supply, right? So it's sustained purely by users and miners, not billionaires, not hedge funds, not VCs. It's not backed by hype men in suits. It's backed by code and conviction, right? The price really has, like as I was speaking about recently, how the price hasn't really gone down that much while other assets have, right? This is because of conviction. This is because people don't want to sell their Monero. That's it. It's not that complicated. People believe in this asset and therefore they don't want to sell it. And this idea of community driven is actually extremely important because when it comes from the community, it spreads organically, right? If people who believe in this coin will talk to their friends about the coin and those people, if they get conviction in the asset, will spread it to other people. So it creates this giant flywheel of conviction spreading. And that's essentially only possible with a community driven coin. And this is why, meme coins are taking off this cycle, which I can make a separate video about, but that's not relevant to this video. So finally, let's talk about the tight supply and hidden accumulation. So we discussed earlier how it's been banned on many exchanges. So I think like the main ways of getting it are just, getting a wallet, getting one of the Monero wallets. And I think there's a few exchanges that offer it, but none of the major ones. And, it's actually improving their ecosystem. They have automatic swaps and their DEX, decentralized exchange access, is improving. It has low liquidity. So if demand spikes, the price can move very fast. And we discussed how there's very little sell pressure because there's so few exchanges that list the coin and the people have a lot of conviction in it. So when people decide to rush into the coin, you have very few people selling. And just like these previous cycles, you've seen the price absolutely take off. So if we look at it in 2021, I don't have the full chart here, but it went up a lot, right, very quickly because of this, because of people not selling, right? The low sell pressure combined with the increased demand that, a bull run leads liquidity to go into, every crypto asset. And that combination creates these gigantic parabolas. And I believe we'll see one this cycle. And I believe a $2,000 target is not that crazy, especially when we've seen, the coin go from 50 to $500 last cycle. I believe something very similar can happen. And I believe that this narrative of privacy will actually become more prevalent than it was in these two cycles as people realize that they need to pivot from Bitcoin into Monero if privacy is truly something they valued. And we've seen how this cycle, Bitcoin has been getting attention from mainstream banks, governments, and I think people are going to start realizing that Bitcoin might not be that asset that is truly private and has, you have ownership over as banks and other, big organizations become involved and they'll want to find the next best thing, which is Monero. So those are the reasons why I believe a target like $2,000 is possible. So I've gone through these points. So the question is, what should you do right now? Right, you've understood the narrative behind Monero, what it has, why it could potentially be better than Bitcoin. So what should you do right now? So let's have a look at the chart. So right now it's at $212. We discussed how it didn't go that much during the dip like the rest of the coins did. So potentially I would think now is a good time to enter the coin. Obviously this is not financial advice, but I think the dip might be over. If you have questions about this, you can watch a previous video I made about if you should be buying this crypto dip, which is more based off macro indicators. But yeah, I believe it's a good time to get in now, especially if you think a $2,000 price target is reasonable for this coin this cycle. But ideally, if you really understand the narrative and you have conviction in this, it doesn't really matter what the price is, right? If you believe and if you value your privacy, you'll buy the asset no matter what the price is. And that can actually lead to crazy price increases, right? If everyone just wants privacy and they don't care about the price, then people don't care about paying $5,000 per coin. And that's how something like this can go up super quickly. So yeah, thanks for watching this video and subscribe for more.